Hosea 12:8. And Ephraim said, Yet I am become rich, and have found me out substance. In all my labors they shall find none iniquity in me that were sin. Ephraim's sin provokes God. Now, the way he covers it is to claim there's no sin. I'm innocent. Go to the prison. Interview the prisoners. Is any of them, none of them were found guilty of the right thing. Now, that's what we all do. We want to claim our innocence, and he says every man will proclaim his own goodness. We're proud of how good we are, but the second we get found out, we want to do the Adam thing and point the finger, the blame game. John chapter 18. John 18 verse 28. You can set somebody up to take your fault. John 18:28. Then led they Jesus from Caiaphas unto the hall of judgment, and it was early, and they themselves went not into the judgment hall, lest they should be defiled. And they're worried about that. They're worried about getting their hands dirty because they've got a big feast coming up. But that they might eat the Passover. Well, we can't do something that's going to violate the Passover. Let's just send him on in. We want him to be murdered, but let's send him on in, and let's not go in there because we've still got to do our religious thing. In Habakkuk 2, verse 6. Habakkuk 2, verse 6. Shall not all these take up a parable against him, and a taunting proverb against him, and say, Woe to him that increaseth that which is not his. How long? And to him that ladeth himself with thick clay. Now, increasing something that's not yours, that's either stealing it or by trickery obtaining it. That is the civil system we have in our court system. That is what we were just talking about, insurance. Insurance is designed to make you whole, not make you better, supposedly. But they've got some little clauses in there they can get around it. Pain and suffering and all that stuff. And they're gaining stuff that's not theirs. On the premise of, well, if. Well, you can't live on if. What if you had died before you even got in whatever the problem was? I had to sit on that jury, and that's what was going on there. It was two insurance companies and two girls that had been hit by a car. And they were trying to sue the one insurance company of the guy who was at fault. Both of them, of course, are going to claim pain and suffering for the rest of their life and millions of dollars. However, she's a professional volleyball player right now. How much pain and suffering goes with that? Exactly. So, yeah, that's America. That's where we live right now. Try to get something without giving anything. Hosea 12, look at verse 9. Hosea 12:9. And I, that am the Lord thy God, from the land of Egypt, will yet make thee to dwell in tabernacles, as in the days of the solemn feasts. That's the time of booths, where they would build a booth and sit under it. The theory behind that is this: when they're going through the wilderness, coming out of Egypt, they had to dwell in whatever they could erect. So he says to remember that time. They still do that in Israel right now. Everybody has either a balcony or a roof place that they would put up a booth, and for a week they go live in the little booth, and that's the memorial to it. And that's something that God says the Israelites were supposed to do. It's a feast of the Lord, and that's one of those that they're supposed to do. He says, will yet make thee to dwell in tabernacles, as in the days of the solemn feast. That is, there was a time they were supposed to be doing this, and obviously they weren't doing it. they should have been doing it. And he says, I'm going to still make you do that. Now the next time around, it's not going to be done by choice. It's not going to be a happy celebration. He calls it a solemn feast. It's serious. Look at Hosea 9, verse 5. Hosea 9, 5. He says, what will you do in the solemn day and in the day of the feast of the Lord? That is, there are some, just because we're happy God's taking care of everything doesn't mean that we're always floating around, you know, on happy gas. There should be some seriousness to this. We're talking about going from heaven, or going from hell to heaven. I mean, that's quite serious. And there's people around us who are not. They're going directly to hell. He says in Isaiah 10, verse 3, they're supposed to know this day is coming, that they're going to go back through trouble. Of course, Daniel's 70 weeks, and they've got to pay for the sins that they've committed as a nation. And so they should be aware of it, and like Daniel, be solemn, be serious. Isaiah 10, verse 3. And what will you do in the day of visitation, and in the desolations which shall come from afar, or from far? To whom will you flee for help, and where will you leave your glory? It says, what's coming, you're not going to be able to, you know, prance around all proud and acting like you're something. When what I've got scheduled for you arrives, you'll be running and fleeing, and pride will be the last thing on your mind. Hosea 2, verse 11. Hosea 2:11. It says, I will also cause all her mirth to cease, her feast days, her new moons, her Sabbaths, and all her solemn feasts. There's those things they were supposed to be doing, and God says, I'm going to make sure you're not doing it anymore. What's that mean? That means they're going into captivity. Now, that's true. It did happen. And it's about to happen again in a worse case scenario than what they've ever imagined. Now, this thing was partly fulfilled when they went into captivity. Look at it in Ezra 3. Ezra 3, verse 4. When they came out of the captivity, it was fresh. It was new. You know, they had just been delivered from Babylon, and so they're coming back in, and this is still within their memory banks, and so they're going to act right for a little while. Ezra 3, verse 4. They kept also the Feast of Tabernacles. That's that dwelling in booths. As it is written, and offered the daily burnt offerings by number, according to the custom of the duty of every day required. So there was a system in place. They knew about it. They should have been doing it. They weren't doing it. They got back into the land and immediately started doing it again. That's good. But then it didn't last long. They quit. This is not really a full fulfillment of what we saw in Hosea, because it was only a few people who did it. You know, only a small handful of people returned. Most of them said, we're happy where we are. You know, we're making a good living now, and we fit in. People have accepted us. Why go back? So only a few went back. So only a few observed it. Now, in that same manner, what comes through the tribulation is only going to be a few minority of the number of the Jews. Look at it in John chapter 1, verse 14.
That's what always reminded me of when he keeps saying remnant, only a remnant left, only a remnant left.
Yeah. One day God's going to restore the entire nation, and then the entire nation will get to do this. John 1, look at verse 14. And the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. One day he's going to dwell with us. Now, I'm not going to run to the standard thing everybody tells you. Tabernacle means to dwell, and tabernacle with us, to dwell with us. But a tabernacle is how do we think of a tabernacle? A building, a place that you go. Okay, it's supposed to be a safe haven for Christians in our context, our spiritual application. Would you go to a church similar to a tabernacle? You're going there for a specific reason. Everybody should be like-minded there. All of those similarities. That's what's going to happen one day in the millennium. It's a reversal of what's going on now. What's going on now is evil is what's predominant. And in the millennium, it's going to be just the opposite. If you're evil, you'll be in the minority, and you'll be found out real quick because Jesus is right there. Romans chapter 11. Romans 11, verse 26. This is a verse I'm sure everybody has memorized by now. Romans 11, 26. And so all Israel shall be saved. When? That's got to be in the millennium. As it is written, there shall come out of Zion the deliverer, and shall turn away ungodliness from Jacob. Now, every word's important. It's from Jacob. It's Jewish. And he's granting salvation to the nation. Nobody's asking for it. It's just given to them. So that's this transfiguration that happened, the Mount of Transfiguration. You remember that event? That event typifies what's going to happen. There's going to be a transformation of the nation. Just like we spiritually are supposed to typify what Israel is going to receive. Every dispensation and age is supposed to make the next one jealous. They're supposed to be able to look back at whatever the previous one was and say, hey, that's pretty good. How do I tap into some of that? For us, we should be able to look back and say, you know, God did some things in the Old Testament dispensation that we don't have any part of. He actually came down and did some miracles. Walked around. I mean, I'd like to see that. Wouldn't you like to hear him preach?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was a great time to be there. And yet not so great. Yeah. Every dispensation's got something that the other one should be aware of, and find how you get it spiritually. For us in the church age, we should be the example of what those that are coming later in the tribulation look back to and say, how can we get into some of that? Matthew chapter 17 is where this happens. Matthew 17 verse 1. Matthew 17 verse 1. He says, and after 6 days Jesus taketh Peter, James, and John, his brother, and bringeth them up into an high mountain apart, and was transfigured before them. And his face did shine as the sun, and his raiment as white as the light. And behold, there appeared unto them Moses and Elias, talking with him. Then answered Peter, and said, I've just got to have something to say here. I tell you, don't you just wish he had just held his peace for a little while? But actually, I'm glad he didn't, because that tells us what not to do. Peter said said unto Jesus, Lord, it is good for us to be here, if thou wilt. Let us make here 3 tabernacles. There's that tabernacle thing. One for thee, one for Moses, and one for Elias. So he's got a multi-denominational system going on here. He says, I know you're here and you're the one that's being transfigured. And, you know, we see you've changed. You're like the sun and your garments are shining like light. But I see Moses and Elijah over there. They're pretty cool too. Let's build 3 denominations. Verse 5. While he yet spake, behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them. And behold, a voice out of the cloud, which said, This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Hear ye him. Forget about Moses and Elijah. If Jesus is here, Moses and Elijah ain't got nothing to say. Verse 6. And when the disciples heard it, they fell on their face and were sore afraid. Good passage. I love reading this passage because you can see everything, and Peter always is a great example of what we would have done if we were there. He says back in verse 1, after 6 days. Now this begins to set up a system that's going to happen. after 6 days, the transfiguration is going to happen. 6 days, meaning after the 6,000th year of this earth's time period. He says in the parallel passage to it, that's in Luke chapter 9, verse 28, he says, and it came to pass about 8 days after. Okay, so one says after 6, one says about 8. So what does that leave? 7. So there's 7,000 years until the transformation. And that'll be the millennium. Look at Revelation 20. Revelation 20. We're working. This time period while we're on the earth is labor. He says to strive, labor to enter into his rest. And one day we'll be able to rest. It's in the millennium. Revelation 20, verse 1. And I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit, and a great chain in his hand. And he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, bound him how long? 1,000 years. Okay, now you'll find people who do not believe in a millennium, 1,000-year rule and reign. They think it's figurative. When he says 1,000, he just means a lot. Well, couldn't he say a lot? How hard would have that been? No, I think 1,000 means exactly what it says, 1,000. Okay, that's the first time he used it. 1,000 years, verse 3. And cast him into the bottomless pit and shut him up, and set a seal upon him, that he should deceive the nations no more till, there it is again, the 1,000 years should be fulfilled. And after that he must be loosed to season. And I saw thrones, and they that sat upon them. And judgment was given unto them, and I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Jesus and for the word of God, and which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, neither received his mark in their forehead or in their hands. And they lived and reigned, here it is the third time, with Christ 1,000 years. Some people can't count, or maybe they just can't read what God keeps repeating. Verse 5. And the rest of the dead lived not again until here it is again the fourth time, 1,000 years were finished. This is the first resurrection. Blessed and holy is he that hath part in the first resurrection. On such the second death hath no power. But they shall be priests of God and of Christ, and shall for the 5th time reign with him 1,000 years. I think it's pretty clear there's a 1,000-year period where Christ is physically on this earth ruling and reigning, and it will be a time of rest if you enjoy righteousness. Now, if you're wicked, you won't be here. He's going to take out everything that offends. And if during the process somebody decides they want to slip over to the wicked side, they'll be publicly punished by Jesus. That's pretty tough. Look at it in Isaiah 11. Isaiah 11, verse 1. This is all happy stuff. It's our future. Now, when he rules and reigns, we'll be right there with him, supporting in whatever position he puts us in. Isaiah 11, verse 1. And there shall come forth a rod out of the stem of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. And the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him. That, of course, is talking about Jesus Christ. The Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, and the Spirit of knowledge and of the fear of the Lord. And shall make him of quick understanding in the fear of the Lord. And he shall not judge after the sight of his eyes, neither reprove after the hearing of his ears. But with righteousness shall he judge the poor, and reprove with equity for the meek of the earth. And he shall smite the earth with the rod of his mouth. That's not a human. That's what God's going to do. Jesus Christ in the flesh. And with the breath of his lips shall he slay the wicked. Now, I wish that was happening now. I mean, not that I wish any ill on the wicked, but I just wish they were cleaned up. One day it's going to be cleaned up. Now he gives man many chances to turn to him. That's just who our God is. However, there's a line that gets crossed, and when he says enough's enough, he's done. And thankfully he's given us the end game, otherwise we would all be depressed. Look at it, the world ain't getting no better. And it's not supposed to. We're supposed to get out of here, and that's our better. But then he's going to come back and he's going to clean it up. You'll find people who think that what's happening right now is everything is spiritual. We're in the millennium now. What they think, what they think is it's a spiritual kingdom. It's not physical. It's all spiritual. One day it will become physical. Here's how they want it to become physical. These are all millennials. They think what's going to happen is we're going to bring more and more people into the kingdom. This is usually charismatics. And it's going to get so good. So many people are going to get saved. Jesus is going to get all excited and say, I got to come back and see this. And so he comes back. No, it's never happened that way in any age. Every age has always ended in total destruction. Like he says, it's going to be like the days of Noah, like the days of Lot. Does that sound like things getting better and better? I think not. Verse 6. Or I guess I stopped at verse 5. And righteousness shall be the girdle of his loins, and faithfulness the girdle of his reins. Verse 6. The wolf also shall dwell with the lamb, and the leper shall lie down with the kid. Okay, that's the rest we're talking about, the millennial rest. Drop down to verse 9. They shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain. For the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. Now that's a great thing. That's, you would think we could tap into that spiritually. You know, we can get knowledge of the Lord, study that Bible. That's not what he's talking about, though. He's talking about he's going to put it in their mind and in their heart. They're not going to need a Bible to read. It'll be in them. Whew, won't that be a day? Verse 10. And in that day there shall be a root of Jesse, which shall stand for an enzyme of the people. To it shall the Gentiles seek, and his, here's the word, rest, shall be glorious. That 1,000-year reign of Christ is supposed to be called a rest. It's referred to as a rest over and over. Look at it in Isaiah 14. Isaiah 14, verse 7. Isaiah 14, 7. The whole earth is at rest and is quiet. Somebody's having a dream. I don't think the earth has ever been at rest and in quiet as long as man's been running it. The second there is rest, you know something's going on behind the scenes. There's never a rest on this earth because the devil's running the show. But one day it's going to change. Verse 8. The fir trees rejoice at thee. The cedars of Lebanon say, since thou art laid down, no fellers come up against us. Now, what you're getting here is a picture of what's going to happen in the end times. Now, it's also a picture of what has happened in the past. This is something that happened before Adam. And it's also something, some of it has not happened before Adam and will happen in the end time, and some of it is going to repeat. I don't have time to go through and decipher it, but you can. Verse 9. Hell from beneath is moved for thee. He's talking to someone in particular. To meet thee at thy coming. It stirreth up the dead for thee, even all the chief ones of the earth. It hath raised up from their thrones all kings of the nations. Okay, so anybody who's ruling and reigning on the earth is doing it through the power of this person. Verse 10. All they shall speak and say unto thee, art thou also become weak as we? Art thou become like unto us? Thy pomp is brought down to the grave. Whoever this is was high and mighty, and is being brought low. The noise of thy vials, the worm is spread unto thee, and the worm cover thee. The worms, plural, cover thee. All right, now it becomes clear who we're talking about. Verse 12. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? Righteousness strengthens a nation. So wickedness does just the opposite. And that's what we're seeing all over the world right now. Wickedness is on the rise, and so is weakness. Verse 13. For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend... I lost my place. I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. He's trying to give himself a raise. I will ascend above the height of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. No, he's not. Now, this is what happens in the tribulation. He starts thinking, I'm running the show down here. Everybody's doing what I tell them to, and if they don't, I just eliminate them. And he gets to do that for just so long, 7 years, and then God fulfills this right here, cuts him down. And then for 1,000 years, he's put into a pit to wait, into hell. John chapter 12. John 12, not 12. I'm dyslexic tonight. John 1, verse 29. I didn't see my colon. John 1, verse 29. The thing is, when we read our Bible, we know so many of the doctrines, and we know how it's supposed to flow, and we start reading into it what we know, instead of letting it tell us what it knows. So let's forget all the doctrine we know. I know that's a dangerous thing to do, but for a minute, and let's just read what it says. The next day John seeth Jesus coming unto him, and saith, Behold the Lamb of God, here's our phrase, which taketh away the sin of the world. Now that's not the way he said it is not the way we spiritualize it. The way we spiritualize it is we say if you accept Jesus Christ, he's taken the payment for your sin. That's not what John's talking about. He's talking about the second advent, the millennium about to begin. He's going to take away sin from the world. Pretty good deal, isn't it? He's going to grant Israel salvation. That's a great deal. Look down at verse 35. So we've seen day 1, now let's go to day 2. Again, the next day, after John stood, 2 of his disciples. Okay, day 2. Now let's go to day 3. Verse 43. And the day following, Jesus would go forth into Galilee, and findeth Philip, and saith unto him, Follow me. There's 3 days. Look at verse 51. And he said unto him, Verily, verily, I say unto you, hereafter you shall see heaven open, and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man. He's given you 4 days in a row right there on purpose, so you can start plotting it. 4,000 years of the earth's history expired, and then Jesus Christ came. Now, that's important. On the 4th day, the sun shows up. Okay, the sun is a picture of the sun in God's system. He's done all of this on purpose. He painted not just the world, but all the events of the world for him, not for anything else. We think wickedness is doing what it wants to do. No, it's not. It's orchestrating the events God forces it to do. Look at it in Luke 13. Luke 13, verse 6. He spake also this parable. A certain man had a fig tree planted in his vineyard, and he came and sought fruit thereon, and found, Catholics, none. No, he found none. Then said he unto the dresser of the vineyard, Behold, these 3 years. Okay, we've seen 4,000 years. Now we're going to see 3. 4 and 3 is what?
7.
There you go. So what's going to happen after this? He says, let's chop this thing down. And he says, no, don't chop it down. Let's see if it'll bear any fruit. No, it didn't bear any fruit. Okay. Now, he does not say to uproot it. Isn't that... I think that's amazing. If I was mad at this tree and I was as powerful as Jesus, I would say eliminate it, roots and all, get rid of it, let's forget it ever happened. No, he says let's just chop it down. Now the reason is because it's going to grow back. He's going to put Israel back together, and he's going to do it miraculously, and that root's going to bring forth fruit again. Exodus 19. Exodus 19. I've got 2 long sections in here. I probably should not have started this one, but we'll see how far we can get. Exodus 19:16. And it came to pass on the third day in the morning that there were thunderings and lightnings and a thick cloud upon the mountain. This is the same mountain that Jesus is transformed on. And the voice of the trumpet exceeding loud, so that all the people that was in the camp trembled. Okay, that's what's going to happen when he comes back. There's going to be some real trembling going on. And there's going to be some real noise that he makes. And it's going to be him coming back. Hosea 6, verse 1. Hosea 6:1. Here's what happens immediately after, or maybe as it's happening in the Advent, when he's coming back, Armageddon. The Jews who have understanding and knowledge will say this, Hosea 6, verse 1. Come and let us return unto the Lord, for he hath torn, and he will heal us. He hath smitten, and he will bind us up. After 2 days, he will revive us. In the third day, he will raise us up, and we shall live in his sight. That's 3 days after the 4,000. He showed up the first time at the 4,000 mark. There's going to be a second time he shows up. It's going to be after 3. That'll be the beginning of the 7,000 year increment. Look at one more passage, Malachi 4. Malachi 4, verse 4. Malachi 4:4. He says, Remember ye the law of Moses, my servant, which I commanded unto him in Horeb for all Israel, with the statutes and judgments. Why is he telling them all the way at the end here in Malachi to remember Moses? Remember Moses? Because Moses is the type of something. Moses is the type of Jesus Christ coming back. He's going to come back on that mountain, and he's going to give law and judgment like what you find in Matthew, what we call the Beatitudes, or not the Beatitudes. It's laying down the law for the millennium is what it is. These are going to be the rules and regulations for when he's ruling. And it's Jesus Christ who's going to be the next, the greater type, or the thing that Moses pictured is Jesus Christ, and he's going to come back in the millennium and do all of this. We'll pick up on that Mount of Transfiguration. There's a little bit more I need to go through, but we don't have time to do it all tonight. Remind me, we'll pick up at 1 John 1 next week. 1 John 1 on the Mount of Transfiguration. All that's going to picture the millennium and lots of good stuff. And then the next verse is more exciting. It talks about what the prophets do and how they use forms and figurative speech and flowery language on purpose. And then we'll see how they've actually done that through history and how it all works out.